Hello, everybody. This is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. I want to thank you for joining me, and you can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. So today we are going to be changing gears a little bit. And I say a little bit because if you've been around recovery long enough, or if you know people that are in recovery, suicide is a very big issue. Nearly everyone that I work with in the recovery community has at least seriously thought about suicide at one point or another. It's a big issue. And so suicide is definitely a part of our overall discussion of recovery, which is the topic of this general podcast. But I wanted to switch gears and talk about suicide prevention, and awareness. And through a series of events, and we'll get into this a bit more on how we connected with one another. Ran into a couple of great guys that you're going to meet here in a moment, and how we initially met was, I've mentioned on this podcast before that I was an instructor at the FBI Academy, at the National Academy, and taught a course called Leading At-Risk Employees, which is still taught to this day by Heidi Marshall, who was on a previous episode of this podcast. And in that particular course, we talked about suicide. Now, one of our guests today, Mark Pfetzer, I did not meet when I was there, and I do not believe that Mark was not in the class that I was teaching at the time. And so it's kind of interesting that several years later, here we are, and we're crossing paths again on this particular topic. So somehow Mark found out about this podcast and reached out to me and wanted to know if he could talk about an initiative that he and some of his friends are working on to row across the Atlantic. That's right. I said row across the Atlantic. They're not going on a Carnival cruise. They're not going on a motorboat. They're not going on a yacht. They're going to get in a rowboat, and 4 people are going to row across the Atlantic. And I think that sounds terrible. I think that sounds absolutely terrible in a really interesting kind of way, and in a way that is intriguing at the same time. But I think that's what you have to do to get awareness on particular issues. And so Mark and Jarrod Slindee, who is also going to be joining us, is going to talk about this project that they have to raise awareness for suicide, and how they plan to raise money for this issue, and just the whole project. So Mark and Jarrod, you're both on the line, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Mark, why don't we start with you, since you were the one that reached out to me. So how did you hear about this podcast, and, what is it that you'd like to do? And tell us about what it is that you and your team are planning on doing.
Sure, Mike. So I, as you alluded to there, I was in the FBI National Academy as well. And through the Facebook of our class session 266, I was seeing advertisements for your podcast and a lot of the topics on your podcast. We started our initiative a few years ago, and so I reached out to you to see if we could get on. We have a goal of raising awareness for mental wellness among first responders. So the more avenues we can hit as far as getting that awareness out, the better. So, and hence tonight.
All right. So what is your initiative? What do you guys plan on doing?
So we have an organization called Guardian Initiatives that Jarrod and I both started. It's a nonprofit here based out of Farmington, New Mexico. We're in the 4 corners of New Mexico, the northwest corner. And through our nonprofit, our first initiative that we're doing, we decided, with both of us being in law enforcement, it was natural for us to try to raise awareness and funding and support for first responder mental wellness and suicide prevention to help let people know that the problem exists, to help get training to first responders and their families and agencies, and also to hopefully someday to be able to help with treatment in some form or fashion.
Okay, and so before we get into the whole rowing aspect, and this is a question I'll throw out for the both of you. Is there a particular reason why this topic of suicide is near and dear to your heart?
I think we recognize the need for it, and being in law enforcement, both of us have a lot of years experience. We've seen, even at our small agency and surrounding agencies, we've seen the need for support in this area, for wellness support. So I think right then and there, that alone to us was enough. And of course, we are starting to see more of a nationwide trend towards this, which is awesome. And so, helping push that awareness level, I think that's part of it. But for me, once we got into this, I'm third generation law enforcement. And while I'm in New Mexico now, I actually grew up on the East Coast. And my father, and I say this, I didn't realize this until we got into it, which brings up another point. But once we really got into this wellness initiative, I realized that I grew up with a dad who had wellness issues and suicidal thoughts from the job. He ended up taking a medical retirement. Once he was better, once he got counseling and treatment and got better, that's when he confessed to us as a family, that there were times when he contemplated suicide, and didn't. He talked about, when my sister and I were young, he talked about it. The thought of us kept him from doing it, but he had a plan. He knew what he was going to do. And so I realized that getting into this, and I say it brings up another issue of, here I was a kid and I only knew my dad as a cop. So that's all I knew him. How he was growing up is how I knew him. We just knew to be on eggshells around him, and be careful. You didn't want to do something to kind of set him off, and that didn't take much. But once he got better, he was a totally different person. So with that, talking about a personal connection to this, aside from seeing the need for it, I've realized that as I've gone and realized, the problem is much more common and much deeper, I think, than we realize. So that's my part of it.
Yeah, I can tell you from my perspective, whether I was teaching at the FBI Academy or the work I do in the community now and in the Washington, D.C. area, it's prevalent. I think it's much more prevalent than people realize. And I commend you for the work that you're doing, and just glad that your dad got the treatment. And so, Jarrod, how about yourself? How did you get interested in this?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same thing with what Mark said. But I guess what really made me really realize that there was a huge problem with this is when we got into this and not really understanding that it's everywhere. I mean, it's not just in our little agency, but it's everywhere. And being an administrator at the sheriff's office, it's kind of scary thinking that this is happening within our own agency, and what are we going to do to fix this and bring awareness to that, to the issue. So for me, that was kind of the eye opener for me, was just realizing that it's a much bigger issue. When I first got into law enforcement, you didn't think about this type of stuff. You thought about driving fast and taking bad guys to jail. You didn't think about this whole other side of it. So being an administrator really kind of opens your eyes to the bigger picture. And so, yeah, that was pretty much it for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because in my career, I've worked corrections. I was a police officer in Washington, D.C., and then an FBI agent. And in none of the training that I had dealt with how did I take care of myself. There was a lot of training on firearms. There was a lot of training on defensive tactics, rules, the Constitution, legal issues, things like that. But how you took care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, it wasn't discussed. At least I don't remember it. Did either one of you guys get that sort of training, back when you started in this profession?
No, I never got it.
Yeah, not from my academy. And I think we're starting to see like Mark said, we're starting to see it a little bit more, but yeah, not from my academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the case. So I'm really glad that you guys are doing this. And COVID, and the time in which we're living in right now has just made this much worse than it was originally. Much worse. At least that's what we're seeing on the East Coast. I don't know how it is out there in New Mexico, but it's not good. It's not good.
I think for sure. I mean, you take all the stressors. One thing's, when we give presentations around here, we tell everybody, all the stresses that come with the job of being a first responder, but every first responder still has all those other stresses that everybody else does as well, and while during COVID, I think we do have a little bit of security with our jobs, and that, we're not shutting down. Of course, it's still a needed service, but maybe spouses, or, how are we going to deal with kids out of school? How are we going to do all this? So, all those, you add all that on top of the stresses of the job, and it just compounds the issue. So,
yeah. So now in your agency, since you're doing this awareness and you're doing this fundraising, are you guys doing anything in particular in your agency to address this issue?
It's funny. We were just having this conversation. Jarrod and I were last night, and we are working on it. We are working on kind of starting from the ground up with how are we going to handle this. And I think one big part has been, I think most people in our agency know Jarrod and I are doing this, and that what we're doing it for. But we've got people talking about stuff in the agency. We've got, we had a sergeant give a presentation about 6 months ago, and it was totally unprompted by us, and it was on mental wellness. And so we've got people talking about it, and we're ready to take that next step and look at, well, what do we need to do to bring in a formal, kind of program? What does that look like? Mm-hmm. And so we're on the cusp of kicking that off within our own agency. I wish we had more. I'll be honest with you. I wish we had more that we were already doing, but I think it's an awesome learning opportunity as well. Like Jarrod said, I mean, as administrators at the office, what can we do? And when we talk to other administrators about this, what can we do? And here's our opportunity to figure out what we can do. So yeah, Jarrod went to some training, and a lot of the training, he brought some great ideas back, and some great points from some people, and a lot of it's coming from larger agencies. So what can we do? We're not a large agency. We're about 102 certified, with a team of volunteer reserve deputies and our civilian crew on the law enforcement side. So it's going to be a good learning opportunity for us that we can then share as well with others. What if you have nothing in place already? How are you going to get something started?
Yeah, I think that's the big challenge. And, and that was one of the things that I noticed when I taught at the academy. And it was one of the reasons why we started Leading at Risk Employees was I taught another course that dealt with like the acute trauma. If you're in a shooting, car accident, maybe your partner dies of cancer, whatever that trauma is, what kinds of policies and procedures do you have to deal with that? And what I found was most agencies actually had policies for that. They were pretty well organized for it. What they did not have was the long-term policies for long-term trauma, long-term illness that just comes from being in a job where, I don't think the public realizes that, being in law enforcement, you're not dealing with people because they're having a good day. You're dealing with them because they're having a bad day. And in many cases, when you're dealing with someone from the public, that day is the worst day of their life. Just think of what it would take for someone to pick up the phone and dial 911. It would have to be a pretty significant event. It's not going to be a day that you forget. Now, when you're an officer, you're there. Yeah. So every person you're dealing with is having a day they are going to remember for the rest of their life, and you're right there with them. Now you compound that, numerous times a day, every day for years. I don't think the average person in the public thinks about how toxic that is to somebody's mental well-being.
Right.
I can tell you guys, I'm now retired from law enforcement, and a year later, I feel like a different person. I feel like a completely different person a year later because I'm not going through the daily trauma that I did before. And
Right.
and you just see that, and there has to be so much work that's done with people and training that's done, and raising the awareness and working on everything in your agency. So tell us about this project where you want to sail across, or row across rather, the I'm going to imagine that about halfway through you're going to wish you could sail across the Atlantic. But how did you find out about this? Tell us about this project.
Okay, so we back up just a little bit. I kind of mentioned it early on. Our three goals with our campaign is awareness, training, and treatment. Awareness of the problem, training on multiple levels to help with the problem, and then treatment to some degree. So on our awareness campaign, big things have a shock and awe value to them, and so we early on we're looking at this race, and it's called the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, and it is a rowing race across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, I call it a race. It is a race. We're not going in there to break records or necessarily win the thing. We wouldn't argue if we did, but that's not our goal. But I first found out about ocean rowing about 12 years ago. I was reading a book on sailing. I've done a lot of different kind of adventurous things. I did a bunch of mountaineering when I was younger, made a couple attempts on Everest.
Oh, wow.
Climbed some other peaks, in the world. Held a couple of records for climbing, which have long since been broken. But so I've got this kind of adventurous, extreme kind of mindset that always captures me now and then. But about 12 years ago, I was reading a book and about these two guys, military guys that rowed from Massachusetts to Ireland. And I told my wife about it at the time, and she's, she said, "Of course not. People die doing that. You're crazy." And I tease that here, 10 years later, this was a couple years ago, when I bring it back up to her, and now that the kids are all grown and I got life insurance, she's like, "That's fine. Go ahead and do it." So Jarrod and I were visiting.
So this might be a profitable adventure for not just for suicide awareness, but for her. Could be
for her. That's right. Yeah. That's right. So, so Jarrod and I were visiting about this a couple of years ago, and he said, "Let's do it." And so, what better way to raise awareness for this? Because it's we tell people, like, if I were just to call you or come up to you on the street and say, "Let's talk about first responder wellness and suicide prevention," probably wouldn't be as exciting as if I tell you, "Hey, we're going to row across the ocean in a boat, with no support. Let's talk about why we're doing it." And Jarrod, are you back on, Jarrod?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure what happened there.
Jarrod always says, what you're saying, Jarrod, that you can't do something sailing or flying across.
Yeah, it's hard to raise awareness flying across the Atlantic Ocean, so might as well row it.
No, but Jarrod, do you? So Mark's talking about his adventurous spirit and the things that he did. Now, do you have kind of a similar background, or are you going straight from playing video games to rowing across the Atlantic?
Yeah, no, I haven't climbed Everest, but I'm not as crazy as Mark is, but. No, I mean, I've skydived a couple times and that's about it. I don't know how he wrote me into this, but yeah, not as crazy as Mark.
Wow.
But now he's forced to be.
This sounds like one of those things where you commit to it, and then about a month later you're thinking, why did I do that? But now I'm committed. So, because I know the personality type. first responders. And even if you guys decide this is a bad idea, it's too late. You're in it. You're in it, right?
That's exactly it. And now, I'm sure for both of us, there's been plenty of times like, oh man, because this is a full-time job, really. Yeah. I mean, on top of a full-time job, and I've even got a little easier than Jarrod. Jarrod's got young kids at home. My kids are out of the house now, so but it's another job on top of our regular jobs. I'm sure there's been multiple times both of us have thought, what did we get ourselves into? But you're right, because it's like, okay, we said we're doing it, not backing out now, especially for the cause. I mean, I think that I carry a bit of that around on my shoulders in terms of, we're saying we're doing it for this cause. We got people who we're trying to get to not quit. We're not going to quit on them either.
No, absolutely not. And that's what it all comes down to, is that sheer determination. And I love sort of like the parallel imagery of it, if you will, meaning anybody that has been thinking about suicide and been in that dark place. And of course, in my podcast, I talk a lot about addiction, particularly alcoholism, but even prescription drug abuse. And you're in that dark tunnel and you're fighting the waves and, and I've seen the videos of this race, and I invite our audience to go and look this up on YouTube, because you can see footage from past races, and there's storms, there's lightning. Sometimes you're exposed out in the sun. The sun's beating down you. Sometimes you're freezing cold, and just all the ups and downs and the work that goes into getting that done. But, you get through the other end. And then finally you get that light at the end of the tunnel and you complete the race. And I love just sort of that imagery when it comes to people being in that dark place when they're thinking about suicide, that you can get through. It's not pretty. It's dark. You have your ups and downs. You have your storms. You have your lightning, but it can be done. And so I just love the imagery of what you guys are doing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, on top of all that, I think, kind of that parallel with the race. Of course, this race, don't get us wrong, we're not trying to compare it to the struggles of addiction or depression or anything like that. But I imagine is much, much harder. But the idea of every day getting up, and nothing's changed. I mean, out in the middle of the ocean, nothing's changed. It's not like we have other boats around us that we're seeing. Nothing's changed. It's just water and horizon. But then again, you talk about that sheer determination of getting through to the other side and eventually get there. And that's a very, and not to be, kind of a silly analogy or what, but a very tiny version of what I would imagine that, struggling through and getting to the other side of that addiction problem or mental wellness problem would be. So.
Yeah. And also, I know with addiction, you got to put in the work. Addiction does not, it's not through osmosis. You don't just, go to a meeting and go home and put the big book under your pillow. And because it's under your pillow, magically information is going to be transferred to your head. You got to put in the work. And I think that's what you guys are doing as well. But the work pays off. It pays off. And if you do, follow simple instructions and learn from the people that have gone ahead of you. So like in the addiction field, and I know in the suicide field, the suicide prevention field, it's the same way, is there are other people that have gone through what you've gone through. And I always have this saying that is, stick with the people that are winners, stick with the winners. Meaning if somebody else has been through this and they've gotten through to the other side, then find out what they did. And if they were successful, then try to do what they've done, and maybe you'll have some success as well. Now that applies to the race. Again, that parallel imagery that you guys are, it does not sound to me like you are sailors. You're certainly not professional sailors. Neither one of you guys are Navy guys, right?
Right.
Now, I got to tell you, I was in the Navy, and many of my deployments were in the Atlantic. And I remember being thrown around pretty hard in a Navy destroyer. But you guys aren't going to be in a Navy destroyer. You're going to be in a rowboat. Now, when we were just saying now that you learn from people that have done this before, so I would imagine that they don't just give you a boat and you go out there and you do it. There's going to be a lot of preparation for this, correct? So run us through what are you going through to get ready for this thing? Because they're not just going to throw you out there in the middle of the Atlantic with no training and no discussions. So what are you guys having to do to get ready for this thing?
Sure. Jarrod, you want to talk about some of the race?
Yeah, so this race it's called Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, and it's put on by a group called Atlantic Campaigns. And in reference to the training and preparation, there's a lot of different rules and regulations that and things we have to accomplish before we even hit the water. We have to take some different sea survival classes, first aid classes, and we also need to actually spend some time on the ocean. We have to do so many hours out on the water, and so much of that has to be at night. Just to make sure that they feel comfortable with us being in the boat and being able to navigate, within the boat. And so there's a lot of different types of classes and just little, preparation type things that we need to do before we actually go.
Lots of inspections on the boat. Like before we can ever race, we have to have inspections on the boat. And once we get out there, they've got to put us through a bunch of other tests as well, in terms of, these boats, if you look at the boats, the design of them, I'm sure you saw, they're made to self-right if they capsize, which they do.
Yeah.
You take a rogue wave sideways, it'll capsize you, and they're made to self-right. So they'll run us through tests, make sure the boat's capable of doing that with us inside the cabins, lots of stuff. So.
Yeah, my impression was anybody that's been on a cruise, like a Disney cruise or a Carnival cruise, the survival boats that they have in case the boat, they kind of look like that. They kind of look like that. Yeah. In a way
on the top, but more towards the ends. Right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And now, do they provide the boat, or do you guys have your own boat, or how is that done?
We actually have to provide our own boat, and that's part of our fundraising and part of our awareness campaign is to raise funds for the boat. But in turn, the boat will be used, through the course of several years, and a conversation piece. When we're driving around town and people ask, what's that for?
Now when you say used for several years, used by you guys, or do you provide it to another group in subsequent years?
No, so our organization will buy the boat. So Guardian Initiatives will buy the boat, and Mark and I are going to be rowing in December of 2022. But there's a team behind us that is forming for 2023, and they'll do the same row that we're doing for first responder mental wellness and suicide prevention. So there'll be teams after us under our Guardian Initiatives nonprofit that will row. Okay,
so you just keep it and for as long as your foundation wants to do this, you have the boat.
Right.
Correct.
I would imagine that thing's pretty. I looked at that thing. It's got to be pretty expensive.
Right.
They're not cheap. They're not cheap, but.
Now, when you're on this thing, you mentioned navigation. So are you, is that through GPS, or are you having to take some like old school navigation classes, navigating off the stars? How are you doing that?
Yes, the boat's equipped with, GPS, Garmin. It's got a satellite phone and stuff like that for navigation. The boat also is equipped with an auto helm. So you just put the location where we want to go, and the boat will basically bring you there. It'll, steer towards that.
Really?
Yeah. So
so you don't have a helmsman. You all you're doing is rowing, and that it automatically for currents and waves and all that. It auto corrects for all that.
Yeah. It keeps you on your path, and it steers you towards your end location. But there's times that the auto helm will fail, and we'll have to manually steer it. And if all those fail, I think Mark jokes about bringing a sextant onto the boat to figure out where we're at and getting us home, to Antigua. So.
well, I can tell you, if it gets to the point where the GPS goes out, that may come in pretty handy. Yeah, it may come in pretty handy. And there's a lot of training that could. Now, Mark, do you know how to do that? Do you know how to navigate off the stars?
I do not. I grew up on the water. I never learned how to use a sextant, but I definitely want to learn. I love to learn different things, so that'll be one of the things I do before we go.
That'll be interesting. So now, getting to that, talking about how you're not going to have a helmsman unless you need to and all else fails. How many people on the boat?
For our team, there's 4 people. We're a 4-man team, and but in this event, there's teams that will do it by themselves. It'll just be a solo rower. There'll be pairs, but like I said, we'll be a 4-man team.
What? Wait a minute. There's going to be people doing this by themselves?
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many teams are involved in this?
Every year is a little different. Usually there's anywhere between 25 and 40 different teams. It just kind of depends on the year.
Okay. And so with it being a race, now that seems, there are different categories, because it would seem to me to be kind of unfair to have you competing against a team with 1 rower when you guys have 4, or how do they work that?
Yeah. Mark, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So I think this year actually, the race goes, they do it every year, and it's going on right now. As a matter of fact, a team just broke a world record. It's funny you mentioned, not being fair, 1 rower against 4. The first team to land this year in Antigua was a pairs team that beat all the 4-person teams.
Really?
Yeah. Now I guess we hear they were using a pretty high speed boat that was very well designed, very fast. But so with that, this year I think the organizers put together 2 different classes, a race class and an open class. To kind of differentiate between maybe some of the more traditional boats versus some maybe custom made, race boats like what the one that just won. But like I said before, I mean, we're going in. It is a race, but we're not. We always tease around like, oh boy, we break the world record, but one, that takes absolute perfect conditions. 2, we've never rode an ocean before. So, and 3, we want to be successful on it. We want to get through. That's our goal. Our goal is to get through safely, get through on the other side, and bring that awareness to our cause. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, are you guys are you going through any specific physical training? Because I understand from talking to you that you're doing this. So even doing this in shifts. So you have 4 people, but you're not all 4 rowing at the same time, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's the normal schedule for 4 rowers is 2 row, 2 rest. And that's done every 2 hours. You switch back and forth 24 hours a day for as long as it takes you to cross the ocean, which for us, we're anticipating maybe 35 to 40 days. As far as the physical training goes, right now, we don't row till December of 2022. So just a little less than 2 years out. We've got to get our boat to do some training on the boat. But until then, we're each kind of just working on our own thing in terms of what we're each a little different. So, what we need to work on, like for me, I'm really trying to work on flexibility more and some core strength. So we're kind of just doing our own thing at this point. And we stay active together as a team. We go out doing different things together as a team. But once it gets closer, we're going to start working with some trainers soon, just some personal trainers. And then really once it gets closer, we'll be spending a lot of time on the boat, training on the boat. But I'll tell you this, Mike, and I've told the team this a lot, from my experience climbing, high altitude mountaineering is it's a very physical sport as well. But I think just like ocean rowing, it's probably more mental than physical. And I think this sounds weird to say. I think any long distance runner knows what I'm talking about, breaking through those mental blocks when things hurt, when things aren't going the way they're supposed to. So it's really a lot of mental preparation as well, which how do you do the mental preparation? I think, again, that's different for everybody. That's a question I got a lot when I was climbing. It's different for everybody. And I think that's where that determination comes in. with training to start seeing how it feels and be realistic and knowing, what's it going to be like to not have more than 2 hours of sleep per day for, well over a month.
Yeah, I think that even putting the physical part aside, that sounds like that alone would be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit in your living room and try to only sleep 2 hours at a time and do that for a month and see what that's like. Now add the physical component to it. Yeah. Correct. Now, as far as food, now you said this is self-supported, so that includes food and water, correct?
Yeah. Jarrod, you want to visit some about our gear?
Yeah. So
our food?
Yeah, everything we need to have for the race needs to be on the boat, and so all the food we'll have on board, and it's really just backpackers type food, freeze dried food that you just heat up in a jet boil, and that's what you eat. In reference to our water, we just take the seawater and just put it through a water maker, a desalinator, and that's our drinking water.
Wow, interesting. So you have so the 2 hours of sleeping, I would imagine this boat has a separate cabin for that, so you can go in and lay down and get some rest.
Yeah, right. There's cabins on either side of the boat, and one's generally for your off time to sleep and eat and all that, and on the other side of the boat is generally where you store all your equipment and stuff of that nature. But yeah. And your 2 hours off, there's a lot to do. You got to eat. You got to, worry about your hygiene and getting some food in. And yeah, there's a lot to do in the 2 hours off. So I wouldn't even guess if you're actually getting a full 2 hours of sleep every time you're off.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to be, it's going to be a lot of preparation for that. Now, so 4 people, do you already have the team? We have Mark and you have Jarrod. How about the other 2? Do you already have those spots filled?
We have one other guy with us, Matt Basinger. He couldn't be here for this, but he's been on the team with us, and we're still looking for our 4th rower. It's got to be a special, perfect person that will fit and jive with our crew to be on a boat for that long. But so we're still on the lookout for that 4th person. There's some people we've approached and they want to do it, but their wives don't want them to do it.
And by the way, you raise a good point. I think in having been on Navy ships myself, you raise a really good point. I think a lot of people that have never been in that sort of close quarters, constant drudgery, constant pressure situation. And, you see this with a lot of military teams, whether they be Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, special teams. When they do the tryouts for those teams, it's not just the mental and the physical part of it, but, what goes through the assessment is the personality part. Would this person fit into the team? Meaning even personality wise, would they fit into the team? And be able to be in long-term high-pressure situations. And that's almost as critical as the physical training because, you don't want to be out in the middle of the Atlantic and start having, personality conflicts and those sort of breakdowns. So it's fantastic you guys are considering that.
Yeah,
so, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We, Mark and I are fairly calm people and to find, Matt is the same thing with us. We're, cool, calm, and collected. And we just want to keep that, even with our 4th rower, just calm, being out in the middle of the ocean, you need to be calm.
Because it doesn't matter how close a friend you are and how calm you are, there's going to be pressure. Right. That going into it. There's going to be times when it's going to get tough, no matter how, calm and collected you are, and you want somebody that's going to have that right personality. So that's funny. I'm laughing because you said that you've got some people that would be interested in, but their wives wouldn't let them do it. So when I spoke to you guys, and so the audience knows, I actually talked to these guys Friday evening, and I went home and I told my wife about this, and I didn't say anything about it. All I did was tell them about what you were doing, and she knows me, and she just looked at me, and I was halfway through the story, and she said, "You're not doing that." I said, "Why? I didn't. Why? I told you I'm going to interview these guys for the podcast." She goes, "No, but I know you." She goes, "I know you. You're not doing that. Don't even think about it." And I said,
"Hey, Mom,
I haven't volunteered
for
that
too."
Well, oh, she did.
Right. Remember 10 years ago when I first brought it up,
that's
she
right.
said, no way. So there's hope for you still.
Well, I remember back when I met my wife in college, and she said that I could go into any profession except for law enforcement. She said if I went into law enforcement, she would divorce me. Then I went into law enforcement, and she said you could work anywhere in law enforcement except Washington, D.C. And then I worked in Washington, D.C. So I don't know. You might have me on your team in December of 2022. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm glad you're doing that though. Now, so let me ask you. So, your third person is he part of your sheriff's office, or is he from another agency?
He works for San Juan County, which is the same county, the sheriff's office that we're with. But he works for San Juan County. But he's a military veteran. He was also a volunteer firefighter for San Juan County, so he's got some first responder experience.
Okay, so he's a coworker of yours right now,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, not at the sheriff's office. He works with the county. Works in kind of the solid waste division, public works, and when Jarrod and I first did this, we envisioned a team of, I think, 4 active first responders. And I guess I should have clarified early on, when we talk first responders, we're not just doing this initiative for law enforcement, even though Jarrod and I are law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking all fire, police, EMS, and even dispatchers. We're
absolutely
really adamant that dispatchers are oftentimes forgotten about as first responders, but they're very much there with us. So Matt, we did a presentation, and Matt approached us after and said, I'm not a first responder, but I totally support your cause. And we got to meet him and, become friends and brought him aboard. And I think what's become really cool about that is it's not just law enforcement, it's other community members as well, and recognizing it and wanting to join it and do this and go through it with us. So, like Jarrod said, he's got some first responder background, and Matt, served our country for 20 years in the service. And, so he also knows the, that kind of what that wellness, the need for that, mental wellness.
Yeah. Well, and the military has a horrendous problem too with that.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So you're on the search for a fourth person.
Yes, sir. We've got, like Jarrod said, we've approached people and people have approached us, but it's got to be just the right person. And it goes back to what you said a little bit ago about, learning from other people that have done it. One of the very first people, Jarrod and I have been reaching out to ocean rowers for 2 years now. One of the very first people we did was a team that won 2 years ago, the race. And, we called them up and said, how'd you do it? And it was really cool because, we're talking like, how did you get through so fast? What did you do that was right? Again, not looking for us to win, but just why not learn from the best? And it was all about their team and how their team worked together and how they were all on the same page. They all agreed to the same thing, that when they left, that they said, our goal is to finish this race and be better friends at the end of it. Now, once we got into it, we realized we could win. And so they all came together and agreed together as a group, yes, let's go after it to win. And they won. But it was all about team dynamics. That was so huge. And then about a month later, we talked to another team that completed it and did, finished well, but their team dynamics weren't as good. They have differing opinions on the boat at the time. One guy wanted to win the race, and, another guy was like, no, let's just relax and have, make this fun and enjoy it. And so they struggled a little bit more with team dynamics. So I think early on we saw, that need for the proper team dynamics. And then also, like you mentioned before, learning from other people. That's huge.
Yeah.
Or, if you want to be successful, not recreate the wheel, utilize those resources. And
again, the parallel imagery with dealing with somebody that's struggling with suicidal thoughts is, you get well, whether it be recovery from a substance abuse issue or suicidal thoughts. It's the team that you get around it. You got to get out of that isolation and build a team. And that's how we get well, is by, taking the people that bring certain expertise and value to the table and incorporating that on our team. And it may be that this team that you're talking about, they may not have been the most physically fit. They may not have been the best athletes, but by working as a team, they not only completed the race, but they won the race. And it's true also when we're working on our mental health, getting the right team of people to help us. So again, I love the imagery, the parallel imagery between what you're doing and the race itself.
It is neat. I mean, and we never even, that was never even our initial plan, but it kind of fell into place. So
now where does it start? So this is across the Atlantic, but does it start on the East Coast of the United States, or where's the beginning? What's the sort of the logistics of this?
Yeah, so it starts off the west coast of Africa, a small island called La Gomera. We take off from there and we go west across the Atlantic, and we land in Antigua. It's about 3,000 miles across the ocean.
And okay, so it goes from the west coast of Africa to Antigua, about 3,000 miles. Okay, what is the quickest anybody has ever done this?
I think the world record is 29 days and so many hours, and that was a 4-man team. And I'm not sure. I can't remember what year that was, but it was within the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
2 or 3 years.
Yeah, not too long ago that they did that.
What's the long? Or do you happen to know this? What's the longest it's taken somebody to do this?
Solo, again, like Jarrod mentioned before, there's solo rowers who do this. Solo rowers will take up to 80 days, 90 days to cross, which, I can't even imagine that. As I tell people, I'd be getting in arguments with myself that long by myself. I don't know if I could do that, but 4-person teams, I think, you'll see those guys out for 55 days. I'm sure there's been longer in the past, but from the most recent, kind of what we've tracked, I think probably, 55 or so days is a longer end of it, with 30 to 35 days being the quicker end of it for this particular crossing. There's lots of people crossing oceans. There's people across the North Atlantic. Of course, there's this route that we're taking, which was kind of the route Columbus took, just starting a little further south off the Canary Islands, not in Spain. Mm-hmm. But there's people crossing, solo rowers going from California to Hawaii, or even going past further all the way to Australia. I think that's a 9,000 mile row from California to Australia. So there's quite a few ocean rows. We originally thought about doing the Pacific, being it was closer. We could row to Hawaii, stay within the States the whole time. But we quickly learned for our success for our first row that the Atlantic would be a better choice for us.
Is that because it's calmer, or what was the reasoning behind that?
I think calmer. The water's a little warmer. Believe it or not, I would have thought the other way, but in the routes you take, it's a little warmer. But plus, this race that we're doing, they've been doing it for so long. They're so well organized, and can to help people get through. I mean, they've got a lot of safety stuff. Jarrod was talking about earlier, some of the training we got to do. But even on top of that, us having to check in with them daily. The race coordinators via radio. If we have problems, they're there. They know kind of how to help. They're even there to coach. We'll see it coaching the solo rowers that are just struggling for a day or something, or may have, they may lose ground. You may get a wind turn on you and you're losing ground.
Yeah.
So they're there for that mental support as well.
And you got to wonder, like with a solo rower, I mean, they have to sleep. So could you imagine being in the boat alone and then having to sleep alone?
Yeah, right. And then you see the boat kind of going all over. There's a tracker. If you go on the website for Atlantic Campaigns, you'll see this YB tracker app, and you can watch the boats, and you can always look at either when they hit a storm or they go to sleep, because you'll see the boat kind of goes all over the place.
Yeah. Wow. Just tremendous. Now, speaking of the course, you mentioned that there's a couple of sailboats that sort of kind of go back and forth and check up on people.
Yeah, they've got a couple sailboats that'll go along the race course and check in with each boat. But of course, if you need help, it could be a couple of days before they get to you. They might be a bunch of miles off near another boat. So, but yeah, they're along the race course and there to help you. If you do need rescue, just recognizing that it could be some time for them to actually get to you.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's a wow, what a feat! And your training. Now, you said that you have to get the boat. When do you plan on purchasing the boat?
Hopefully, really soon. Go ahead.
Okay, Jarrod. So in the next couple of months, or what are you looking at?
Yeah, we just on Friday, this past Friday, we were speaking with a boat builder, Rannick Adventures, which is the most prevalent boat that does this race, and we were speaking to him on Friday about kind of pricing and build schedule and all that stuff. So, but yeah, we hope to have it, within the next, 2-3 months, or at least have a down payment paid to somebody within the next 2-3 months.
So you may have a boat by summertime.
Yeah. I think the goal is to have a boat this year, but I think it'll be late summer when we actually physically have it.
So training wise, now you guys are in New Mexico, so you're going to be doing some training there, correct? But then you said you have to actually do some ocean training. So where will you guys be doing both sets of training for that?
So just in our local area, we have it's called Navajo Dam, and it's a fairly large reservoir that we'll do, I imagine the majority of our training on. So we'll do majority of the training there, and then I imagine we'll go to the Gulf Coast to do some training with another team that we've met. They're out of Castle Rock, Colorado. They've kind of got a home base in Mobile, Alabama. And so I imagine we would go down there with them. They've kind of invited us down to go with them and train with them on the Gulf. Interesting.
Well, guys, tell us how we can get a hold of you. How can somebody contribute to your cause? How can they reach you if they want to help out or get involved, or if anybody out there is listening and you want to try out, for the team? How would they do that? I would recommend you guys put together sort of like a Navy Buds SEAL training test and see, who survives that and take. No, I'm just kidding you. But no, but seriously, if there's anybody that wants to contact you to help out and certainly donate, how would somebody go about doing that?
So we have our website, which is guardianinitiatives.org, or you can on the website too. We have a spot for donations, but a lot of information, more information about us, more information, some videos on the races, more and just some more generalized information about who we are and what we're doing. And then we also have Facebook and Instagram as well. So if you look up Guardian Initiatives on Facebook, you'll see us there. And disclaimer: we're definitely not social media people. We're not advertising people, but we're getting there. And it's going to just keep getting better as it goes, and we keep getting closer and closer to the race, and continue to push out some of our training and awareness and treatment for first responders.
Well, great. Now, so you're going to keep all your social media update as you get closer to the date. Maybe updates on training, maybe pictures of the boat. Once you get that, kind of put that information out there, so anybody that's following you, because I'll certainly be following you guys. Are you going to be putting that out there?
Oh yeah, well we plan on lots of photos of the boat. When we get the boat, we think that'll be a really it will be a huge step for us. And also again, kind of to bring the conversation piece, if you will, to talk about it. So we'll have stuff on that, and even when we're racing, sending back any kind of videos that we can, or pictures, or whoever that we can when we're out there racing. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities with the race, and to get in front of different crowds. Even, we've even thought, even if it's not for first responder stuff, I mean, local schools, I'm excited once it gets a little closer for, local schools to be able to follow us. Just kind of, when we were kids watching at school, watching space shuttle, launches and kind of the same thing, a little bit different platform now, but so there's a lot of different opportunities.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the boat itself is a big advertisement for the cause. And I mean, and I would imagine you're going to be towing that around and putting it in different locations so people in the town where you are and throughout the state can see the cause.
Yes, we have quite a few, not quite a few, but we have our sponsors that are waiting for that to happen for us to bring it outside of their place of business and, attract some people in and talk with them and have some events, maybe bring people out on the boat, on the lake, and, different events. We are waiting for kind of all the COVID stuff to get better so we can actually do some of the events we had planned originally. But the boat is really kind of a big floating billboard as well.
Oh, it is.
For companies. We are a nonprofit, a 501c3. So, companies that are donating it, make that an advertisement donation to be on the boat and float across the Atlantic Ocean with us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I want to thank you guys, Mark Pfetzer and Jarrod Slindee. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
and
Mike.
I'm going to put out that it's the guardianinitiatives.org, guardianinitiatives.org. Check them out on Facebook. And what other social media were you on again?
Instagram.
Instagram.
Instagram. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So check them out on that Facebook, Instagram, and guardianinitiatives.org. Thank you guys so much for the important work that you're doing, and just what a tremendous feat and undertaking that's going to be. And thank you so much, folks, for joining us. As always, I'd like to say I don't represent any group, and I do not represent anyone other than myself. And my only purpose for this podcast is to give information to share with you and talk about what I've done, because it's helped me, and maybe it will help you too. So if I've said something, or if these guys have said anything that doesn't apply to you or you don't agree with, just discard it, but try to take away any information that you can use for yourself or others, because that's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and as we try to impact others with the knowledge that we've gained through our experiences. So with that, please visit us at our Facebook page, which is Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let me know how I'm doing, and let me know if there's a topic that you're interested in hearing. I'd love to hear from you. And guys, I want to let you guys know that I want to have you back on the show, and I certainly want to hear updates as to what's going on. And then, of course, when this is all over with, we'll have you back as well if you guys would love to join us.
That would be great, Mike. We appreciate it.
Guys, thank you. And everybody listening to the podcast, give us a follow, give us a like, and we will talk with you soon. Take care.